I'm Jay Horton. I make movies that make money, and this is Filmmakers On. Maybe I should have called these last couple episodes Distributors On. Today's guest is really a filmmaker too. Joe Dain helps run TerrorFilms. He's been in the business for 20 years. He started out working as an actor, and then as a producer, and now a distribution executive. He has a lot of interesting things to say about the current state of indie distribution and what sets his company apart. He has a lot of interesting things to say about the current state of indie distribution, what sets his company apart from others, and he has some pretty tough love thoughts for indie filmmakers out there complaining about the current state of the indie film business. In a landscape filled with pessimistic people, Joe is an oasis of optimism. Enjoy my talk with Joe Dain.
How's it going, man? Good to meet you.
Good. How are you? You too. Sorry.
Oh, no problem, man. You guys getting ready for AFM?
No, we just, for us right now, we're in the middle of, we have a premiere tomorrow, and we have one of our sort of top films where we did a director's cut, which is launching exclusively on Prime on Friday. And
Cool.
It's just been, it's one of those, this time of the month for us.
Right.
October is crazy for us. So.
Joe, what's your background and what led you to TerrorFilms?
Wow. So many moons ago, I was an actor. Like a lot of struggling actors at that time, needed a side job. And I found an ad, oddly enough, for a company that was looking for a runner, a production company was looking for a runner. It had a lot of flexibility. It had everything I needed it to be. And I went to apply for that job, and that happened to be for Full Moon Pictures. What was interesting about Full Moon, at least for my time there, is that it was really, truly like a mini studio in every sense of the word.
What years roughly was this?
I think it's going back to 2004. So what happened is I ended up taking the job, and what was great for me is that I was sort of getting to learn all of these things that I hadn't anticipated learning, because there was every department there, from legal to in-house video sales to the art department, marketing. Truly, again, it was really a one-stop shop on a very small level, but essentially was everything that, you kind of needed to know about the business. One day, the head of video sales at that time had called me into his office, and he said, "Shut my door." I was like, oh, I thought I was in trouble. And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I looked you up." He says, "You're an actor." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You've done some work." And at that point, I actually had done some TV movies. I had done some things that were, I'd done an HBO movie. I'd done some relatively decent things. And he sort of called out the credits. And I was like, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I did need a part-time job." And I said, "But, I'm interested in the behind the scenes of the business." He was actually kind of a fledgling writer and director, and he had convinced the company to finance a script that he had written called Delta Delta Die. So he wanted me to actually play the lead, the male lead. And I was reluctant at first, but then I said, on one condition, I said I get to go co-produce it. And he agreed to that. And so that ended up being the first time that I actually got a producing credit on the film. It was a wacky film, Julie Strain. I mean, just, funny. Tiffany Shepis. I mean, sort of, horror staple kind of people. But because Devin Hamilton was his name, by the way, Devin. And because Devin was the head of video sales, he kind of leveraged that, very intelligently to his advantage. And the film actually ended up doing a ton of sales. And listen, you're talking about a time when Blockbuster Video and Hollywood Video were really what kept independent companies alive, because they would purchase 20, 30,000 units of, unknown films at, $3, $4, $5 a unit. And those were big deals for these small films. It's not like today. We didn't have any of those streaming sites and, Amazon and all those things. They didn't exist yet. And so it did so well that he was given, more opportunity, but also because it did so well, I was actually then promoted and I became initially sort of the in-house line producer and unit production manager. So that's where it started. And I started dealing with sort of more managerial things. It just kind of went from there. And so somewhere along the way, I formed my own production company, and I had sort of cut a deal with them to say, look, I want producer credits and I want production company credits on these, because I sort of just suddenly saw a different path for myself rather quickly. I loved horror. This was a different kind of horror. It was sort of goofy, campy, really over the top, kind of stuff. I mean, I produced movies like The Ginger Dead Man with Gary Busey.
Yeah, I know it.
The Evil Bong with Tommy Chong,
Right, yeah.
Decadent Evil. I mean, I did some crazy stuff, and they were fun. They were over the top, ridiculous. Definitely a fan base for those types of movies.
Definitely.
And from there, I had kind of moved away from that into kind of producing a wide variety of content. I did some dramas. I did some comedies. I really was just so dug deep into the independent space. It was right around the end of 2000, pretty much most of 2010. I was doing a consulting business to where I was providing services for independent companies that couldn't necessarily afford to have somebody on staff. So whether that was foreign sales collections, whether it was dealing with union issues, I was pretty versed in so many things. I spent a lot of time in business affairs. So I had a really good business going on when I got approached by another company. A friend of mine, who's now my colleague and partner in the new labels, had approached me about doing some consultation work for a company called Sunrise Pictures that was in the middle of some transitional things. They had some big movies they had just done with Rachel Weisz, The Whistleblower.
Okay.
They had done a movie with Kevin Spacey called Father of Invention when Kevin still had a career. And a couple other big things. And they were just needing some help with some transitional things, which I had jumped in. I helped them with. They were sort of so happy with the end result that as part of that transition, they were kind of letting go of a lot of people and kind of cleaning house. And they had offered me a full-time position of head of production. And initially I turned it down because I was really enjoying working for myself. And that took a lot of years to get there at that point. And so it wasn't something I had jumped at immediately. And then there was kind of a follow-up request. And I said, oh, okay, let me give it a shot. And I ended up being with that company from 2010 until, right about 3 years ago, I think to 2017. So almost a good 7 years. We did a lot of great stuff, and they were good people, and it was a great company, and I really loved it. And while I was there, one of the things that we had talked about was we had pitched the idea of financing a handful of micro-budget horror films under the label. And it was strictly a business decision because I knew that horror did well. It wasn't dependent on movie stars. It was low-risk investment.
Right.
And the CEO of that company at the time, he loved the idea, but he didn't love the idea of putting those films under what he felt like was his elevated art house banner. And that made sense, and we understood it. And so hence was the birth of TerrorFilms. That CEO backed Jim and I and financed 3 films, original films, that we were able to help launch the label because we felt it was important that, we wanted to be able to show filmmakers when we decided we were going to break off and do a separate label. I wanted to be a soup to nuts operation. I wanted to kind of control our own destiny and handle our own distribution. So it was important to, sort of show filmmakers that we had skin in the game, essentially.
Yeah. Now, what year was this that you started, Terry?
So the company was technically formed in 2014. And then over the course of the end of 2014 into 2015 into 2016, we financed and produced 3 movies. Patient 7, The Chosen, and Trace were 3 original films that we financed. When we first launched, we didn't quite have our legs yet. So we partnered with Gravitas Ventures on the domestic side for Trace while we handled foreign and DVD. And then we started to get our legs, and we ended up getting a nice Netflix deal on The Chosen. Patient 7 really took off because we had, people like Michael Ironside, Alfie Allen, Amy Smart. It was really great anthology that we did, and we got really lucky on the material that we had, available to us. And then when we officially launched, which was the last quarter of 2016, and I say officially as a distributor,
right?
We launched with 7 films. 3 were our originals, and 4 were films that we had acquired. And among those, one of those films was Hell House LLC, which became, kind of a monster in the space that, I don't think any of us predicted the level of fandom that it was going to create, and ultimately spawned 2 more films. And now we're actually developing a limited series off of that. And here we are now. This quarter we're literally 4 years old, really, as a distributor, and we have about 80 titles out across multiple platforms all over the world. And we actually have a sister label also because our popularity kind of caught on so quickly. One, because of our model and our transparency, but also two, because of the fact that we are filmmakers ourselves. So that was very appealing to filmmakers. You know, we understand the challenges of dealing with distribution and how many times it's been disappointing. So that was really exciting to get that, so that we were getting to the point where we were getting all kinds of films sent to us. So comedies and dramas and documentaries. And of course we were passing on them.
Right.
Because we were a genre label.
Yeah.
So we actually formed another label in late 2017 called Global Digital Releasing. And she's more boutique, that label. We have a lot less content, but it did allow us to take on films outside of other genres that we were interested in. So, and it's all run by the same team. We're a small mom and pop shop. Jim's my partner and heads up acquisitions and development. I oversee, the distribution and marketing, and we have a phenomenal team on the operational side and the marketing side, our head of tech operations. But it's literally about 6 of us that run the whole show.
That's great. I guess, what's fascinating about the time period. So you guys are basically getting going as a distributor in 2016. And so you're basically navigating this like seismic shift in the indie market. So it was, 2014 to 2016, that was like when the streaming started to take off.
Right.
Right. DVD sales were kind of not dying, but they were not what they were.
Yeah, and I've heard that a lot. We were right on the cusp of that. And oddly enough, that wasn't planned. It just so happened that was sort of the timing of it. I wish I could sit here and say, that was some masterful strategic plan of, it just so
right
happened,
place, right time.
Exactly. We just happened to launch at that time frame. And, and oddly enough, interesting about that, we've actually since eliminated DVD. We don't take DVD rights. We allow filmmakers to hold on to them. And honestly, we rarely take foreign rights these days. And because buyers were not really and haven't been really for years that kind to smaller independent films. The amount of money that it will cost to attend a market versus what you were getting offered, it was really kind of upside down. And it's not that we don't, it's not, and I should preface this. So we don't turn foreign away, but what we do is we have a different approach to foreign. And that approach is that either A, we sell directly to foreign buyers that we have relationships with around the world, where I literally have to send them a screener link and some poster art, and they're either interested or they're not. With the platform explosion now, you're talking about, but just between places like iTunes and Google Play, Amazon, we can reach 60 English-speaking countries at the press of a button on our dashboard.
Right.
There's no need for subtitles. There's no need for dubs. And that's also been really great. We also work directly with platforms in certain countries. So like we work with a company called Horrify, which is a streaming site in the Netherlands. We're working with a streaming platform called House of Disaster, which is out of Italy. So we're doing that. And then also too with partners like Shudder, Netflix, who, again, has really kind of turned its back on independent films, but Shudder's a good example because they'll tend to take, US, Canada, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand. So we have a way of giving our films a worldwide footprint without all the nonsense and expenses that come with a traditional route. Now, of course, traditional's out the door right now because markets are virtual. Who knows if they're going to continue to stay that way or not. But yeah, anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how that model changes after this pandemic is over, because I think that a lot of filmmakers are going to get to the point and say, well, why am I going to sit behind a bunch of insane, overinflated market attendance expense when you don't have to attend a market to sell my film? Which is the truth. I mean, listen, it's just the simple truth. No one needs to go fly all over the world and set up these booths and set up these hotel rooms and spend tens of thousands of dollars to sell movies anymore. That's been proven. And I think that is the interesting thing that we're all grappling with the digital space. And I think it's just kicking old school ways in the nuts, to be perfectly honest, which I don't think is a bad thing. I don't think it's bad.
I don't either. And you get some pushback from filmmakers that came up with, the traditional method. That's how they thought it was done. So there seems to be a resistance to the new guard a lot. But I mean, I personally think it's a super exciting time for independent film, the streaming.
100%. I 100% agree that this idea that you have to go, and I have to tell you, AFM is one of the most depressing places I have ever been to. And I've gone on more times than I would like to count.
Yeah.
And I always joke, if I walk in and I see one more poster with Jean-Claude Van Damme or Eric Roberts or Mickey Rourke on it, I'm going to throw myself off the highest balcony.
Right.
Because it's become almost kind of like a dumpster of kind of, it's like elevated B crap that is being sold in these markets these days. And so I think the only people really making any money are the hotels and the convention centers and the sales reps, honestly. I mean, I don't know how many filmmakers are actually making any money from these market attendance kind of setups, but anyway.
Yeah, no, I know I never did. So what separates Terror from a typical distributor?
I would say a few things. Putting aside the fact that we are filmmakers, that we understand this decision, we understand how hard this decision is. We put our money where our mouth is in the sense that our model is very specific. We partner with filmmakers in a way in which we absorb a lot of the traditional costs as part of our skin in the game. So although we don't write an MG, we don't write in advance to filmmakers, we do in fact absorb quite a bit of expenses in order to launch those films. All right, so for example, we have a model that is where we will cover the QC, we'll cover any minor QC fixes, we will cover creating entire art campaigns, creating trailers, including the music that goes with those trailers, platform delivery service fees.
Right.
We guarantee marketing. We guarantee paid ads. These are all things that are actually in our contract that are definitely different than most.
Right.
Our terms are some of the shortest in the business. 5 years is our term, with a mutual yearly renewal after that. We are very flexible with rights. 9 times out of 10, the only thing we're going to ask you for are North American digital. Right. Anything else is open for discussion. And we, in fact, encourage filmmakers, keep your foreign, keep your DVD. And when I tell filmmakers all the time, listen, unless there's a distributor coming to you who's going to offer you some significant advance, they're going to write you a nice check for all your rights for 20 years. Because I mean, I never understood those terms. What the hell are you even doing with my film for that long?
Right.
As I say that in lieu of a distributor doing that, there's no reason for them to take all those rights. So go and outsource your DVD to somebody else. If you don't want to sell it yourself, which is an option today, there are companies like MVD and there's a handful of others that will take on just DVD rights. Go find a foreign sales rep and go at least explore that. So that way now what you're doing is you're working with 3 partners, you're monetizing from all angles. We also encourage filmmakers, their festival runs don't interfere with anything we're doing. In fact, we encourage it. We cross-promote them. We work with them on schedules. Let's say they want to run, they need to run a course of a festival run. We'll wait until that's done to release the film. We're very hands-on with the filmmakers in the way of art and posters. We don't just create that stuff in a vacuum and say, this is it. We share that stuff. We kick the ideas around because we're a big believer that you know your film well. We have our expertise. We know what we're doing. We want to meet you in the middle. We want, it's sort of always, I try to have that sort of conversation of where creative and commerce have to kind of meet in the middle, where we want to create materials you're excited about, that you feel good about, but that we also feel like elevate the film, that help maybe expand its reach to a broader audience than maybe initially you thought was available to you. So these are some of the things that I think really make us different. And our communication, I mean, if a filmmaker waits 24 hours to hear from me, that's a long time. We're very accessible in that sense. We want filmmakers involved with promoting, marketing. Of course, we do our thing, but we encourage them, to be involved in the process. And so I think all of those things are especially in this space today, are things that give us an advantage at most. The other thing is we're also not a high volume company. So unlike some of our competitors, I guess you could call them. You know, if I were to talk about something like a Gravitas Ventures, who I've worked with several times, who I think is a good company, a transparent company.
Yeah.
I've never payment from them, but they're putting out 150, 200 titles a year, right?
Yeah.
And they're transparent about that, so you can't really blame them. They don't do any marketing whatsoever, which they're also transparent about, and they tell you. In fact, they send you a little nice PDF when your film goes live, and they're like, "Hey, congratulations! Here's where your movie is, and here's how you promote it." And of course that makes sense, because if you're putting out that kind of volume of films, how do you possibly promote them, right?
Right.
Except for maybe the random occasional maybe diamond in the rough that they feel like they want to spend a little time on. So, you know, all of those things make us accessible and very different, and give us an opportunity to take independent films, polish off the independent, because we really try to do that where we can, and give them an elevated appearance from all of their marketing materials and everything else. And also really spend time and money and energy in actually marketing them to help them rise above the noise. Because look, at the end of the day, we're in a very strange time right now. Digital's been blowing up for a long time. Since COVID happened, I mean, we're in an interesting time now where, you know, the volume of films that are going to the digital platforms is unprecedented in this year. And you're also now having to compete with studios who don't have theaters to put their blockbusters in, and now are dropping these massive, massive movies onto the digital platforms. So we have this glut of content hitting the digital platforms that we've never seen before. Right. And you're also hearing talks of companies like Disney focusing just on, you know, potential digital releases moving forward. I just read an article that was talking about the next James Bond maybe
possibly Netflix or something.
Right. Yeah. Right. So it goes to show you the landscape. But what we've learned in this process is that people are happy to sit home and watch movies and TV at home, watch their favorite movies at home. They don't necessarily need to go to the theater, right? They can go buy a 60-inch flat screen at Walmart for $500, right? So the whole landscape of the industry has changed. And for companies like us, it's about a matter of how do we maneuver those waters, and what do we have to do to kind of cut through the noise to help our films kind of rise above. The other interesting thing that we've seen an explosion of is AVOD platforms, so advertising-based platforms. So whether it's Roku, whether it's Tubi, on the horror side, like Kings of Horror, Watch Movies Now, you've got Pluto. It's amazing because if you remember, the business spent years trying to eliminate commercials, right? It started going all the way back to TiVo. Oh, fast forward through your commercials, right? Yep. I'm dating myself now. So, and it was funny when COVID hit and people were broke and couldn't afford 18 different subscriptions. I mean, come on. You got Netflix, you got Prime, you got HBO Max, you got Disney, you got Hulu. It goes on and on and on and on. I mean, how many subscriptions can people have, right? I mean, it gets to a point where you're like, how many of these can I actually afford to have? Yeah. And I think what happened is a lot of people started turning towards the AVOD platforms in a way that we haven't seen. And I have to tell you, platforms like Tubi TV are outperforming the biggest transactional and even SVOD platform, rev share platforms like Amazon in a way that we haven't seen. So we put a lot of time and energy into that. And we have, of course we have to have a lot of conversations with filmmakers sort of explaining, how we pay attention to things, paying attention to the trends, the markets, what's working, what's not. And I'm great. I'm glad you want your movie on Vudu, but no one's paying $3.99 for your movie on Vudu. They don't care, right? They don't, but you know what? They may watch it on Tubi or Roku or Watch Movies Now or Kings of Horror because they'll take a chance on it for free and they don't mind watching the commercials, right? Right. And so it's a mindset too of having to get people to sort of, get their head wrapped around it from that perspective as well. So. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that with a lot of filmmakers, there is a lot of resistance to that. They look at these rates that seem lower, and they're like, oh well, I just I want to rent my movie for $3.99 and get 50% of that, and not pennies on the hour or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, you're getting exponentially more eyeballs and more pennies that add up on those AVODs and SVODs.
Well, and that's one of the things that we try to say. And we most certainly don't, rule out TVOD, but there was a time, at least from a release strategy, once we sort of rule out any kind of licensing potential, if there's somebody on the front side, a Shudder, a Netflix, or Hulu, excuse me, that would be interested. Once you rule it out, I mean, the traditional route would be a transactional release first. You allow that to live for a certain window before you open up onto something like free with Prime and AVOD platforms. But I have to tell you, we had to shift gears when COVID hit.
Right.
And we had to start rethinking that model because suddenly people were not spending money on independent content. And we were suddenly, again, as I said earlier, we were suddenly found ourselves in a competition space where normally we weren't worried about a big studio movie coming out because it was in the theater. Right. But if a big studio movie's hitting Amazon the same day, one of our independent films is, you kind of have to ask yourself, well, all right, well, listen, they're going to go pay $19.99 day one to go rent this big studio movie. I don't know if they're going to spend, another $3.99 to rent a film they might not have necessarily heard of. So it's just all of those things that we have to kind of talk filmmakers, through the process. And more often than not, most get it. We have there's always somebody that is perpetually unhappy or complains, and we try our best to deal with that. But I think that's just, I think that's any industry, really.
Oh yeah.
We do our best to weather that storm when we have to.
Right. So let's talk just a little bit about marketing for a second. What are some of the more successful avenues for you, like advertising these independent films? I'm assuming it's a lot of social media stuff.
Yeah.
Like
So we have
Facebook
social media accounts across the spectrum. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We just launched a TikTok one for TerrorFilms.
Right.
Facebook marketing has been tremendous to us. It has been an incredible tool because of the amount of people that you can reach very easily. And, you can do click-through ads where they're interactive. So somebody sees something, they see a trailer, they see something they like, they click it, takes it right to the platform. So whether that's an immediate watch or purchase, or it's oh, hey, I'm going to watch this later and put it in my queue. That's been really great for us. It also has allowed us to build up fan base, followers, build on those marketing, apparatus as far as, our actual, because these are very tangible, real followers at this point. We've had some nice success with Google Ads. We do some printed ads more on the horror side than we do on the GDR side, just because, there's a lot of horror magazines like Scream Magazine. We usually have something in Scream Magazine every couple of months. And we do also things with some of the festivals. We sponsor festivals, so our banner's up there, and it also gives us an opportunity to see films a little bit sooner than before they hit the general markets. It's also getting the filmmakers involved. I can't tell filmmakers enough, get your friends, your family, your cast, your crew, get everybody talking. And then also too, it helps that we bring the kind of marketing to the table that we do, because we really do a big push for, trying to get reviews. We do clip drops, poster drop, trailer drop. We really get people talking. We really work hard at trying to get interviews and podcasts and things like that for the filmmakers and some of the key cast, to help just drum up as much awareness as we can. And again, as I keep saying, to sort of cut through the noise. If we took our films and we just dropped them on the platforms and did nothing else, we probably would have gone out of business by now. And unless we had decided to be high volume, like a company like a Gravitas does. And I think that is a big part of their business model, and why they've been around for so long, is because, they really do kind of just, flood the market with content. And it becomes a numbers game at that point, right? Where the more content you have, the more money you're making, because it's just purely a numbers game. So, it's just not something that feels right to us, at least not now. I can't see that ever changing, really, because again, we do want to put the time and energy, and also too, we come back to our films. The interesting thing about also something we do that's very unusual. Most distributors, as a rule, there's the initial ramp up, right? The initial PR and the marketing and the initial release. And then,
Yeah.
they move on, right? They move on because that's just what they do. And see, we don't do that. We do a couple of things. One, we do a stifled release. So unlike most distributors, it'll dump a film onto 9, 10 platforms in one shot. We don't do that. We'll do 3 or 4. And then in a couple of months, we'll do another, and then we'll do another, and then we'll do another. And part of the reason that we do that, and it was sort of a trial and error thing about the process, because we used to do that kind of initial mass, release.
Right.
And what we learned is that by stifling out the platforms, is that it gave us an opportunity to naturally promote the film over and over and over again every time it hit a new platform, right? And while also promoting that new platform, reminding people the other platforms it's available on. And it's because we learned that platforms are like anything else. People use different platforms for different reasons. Maybe you don't mind watching commercials, but you have a Roku device, so you're not really going to use Tubi, right?
Right.
Maybe you don't have a Roku device, so you don't mind Tubi. Maybe you hate commercials and you rather watch it on Amazon Prime. Maybe you don't have a Prime subscription and you don't mind renting it. But then there's some people who we see it on social media. Some people specifically want to rent off of a certain platform or buy from a certain platform. Hey, when's this coming to Vudu? When's this coming to Google? When's this coming here? And so we really got to the point where we weren't here to really kind of, debate the platforms and who liked what, rather than we wanted to present an opportunity where we kind of could keep giving life to the films over and over and over again. So that's one thing that we do. We also do constant promotions. I mean, especially for the month of October for us, almost every entire film in the library gets promoted during the month of October, because the other beautiful thing.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question about the horror movies in October. I remember years ago talking to a distributor for my second or third horror movie, and they were telling me that indie horror had a lot of trouble in October. They kept telling me not to release anytime around October. Is there any?
I would say that as a rule, that we don't try to release a lot of new films on October for that reason.
Okay. We
do. Of course, we have some releases, but we usually try to limit it to a couple, so we give them a lot of time and energy.
Gotcha.
But we promote the library over and over and over again, because look, people are in that headspace, they're in that mood. They're looking for fun horror movies. For us, one of the things that we learned is just the beauty of the digital space is there's never a bad time to find a new customer, a new fan, right? Because it's a big world we're living in. The other thing that we're also finding is that the platforms are all expanding into new territories all the time.
Yeah.
They're all expanding their reach. So we just had something happen recently with Tubi expanded their footprint. And they reached out and they said, hey, if you have international rights to these, can we light them up? Absolutely, because now they're in Australia, now they're in Mexico, now, you know what I mean? So, and again, it's more eyeballs, it's generating more rev share, it's all of these things that start to matter. So, again, it's not a perfect science. Nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody can say, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, your film is guaranteed to be a success, because if that existed, everybody would use it and there'd never be a failed movie again. So for us, it's about beating the drum, right? We have to keep beating the drum. And I guess it's kind of how we say a lot to filmmakers. We look at this process as your distribution partner, as a marathon, not as a sprint, right? Don't expect that we're gonna, run ourselves to death into the brick wall and then that's it. We're not going to do that. We're going to take a long, steady run. And here's the truth too. There are some films, they burst out of the gate. They get licensing deals. They get great reviews. The fans love it. It starts doing well transactionally immediately. Okay. Then there's other films. It's 3, 4, 5 quarters later, 7, 8, 9 platforms later. Right.
Right.
Why that is, I can't say. There are films in our library that I would say, hey, this is a really solid film that fell on its face. And there are smaller indie films that, I wouldn't have expected to have performed the way that they performed. And that just goes to show you how diverse, too, the tastes are especially in the horror genre. The horror genre is sort of an interesting genre, you know, because, you know, there's a very whipped up, sort of excited fan base out there. But if they don't like it, man, they don't like it.
Absolutely. So I have two last questions.
Sure.
The first one is, and this is a complete hypothetical.
Yeah.
If I were to walk in and hand you $50,000 to produce a horror movie, what type and how would you spend out that money?
I find more often than not that filmmakers don't know what to do with money, small amounts or large amounts. Listen, I've seen filmmakers piss through big budgets and still didn't execute correctly. You know, when I always say to a filmmaker who's looking to make any kind of film, but especially I think in the micro budget space, is to say to make something that you, first of all, that you as the filmmaker have a handle on, right? Don't try to take on something that you have no idea what to do with. Number one.
Okay.
Number two, avoid things that you're not going to be able to pull off well at that kind of a budget. So whether it is too many stunts, whether it is doing practical makeup effects that you don't have the time or the budget for, or, you know, visual effects, because what you're going to end up with is a half realized movie that just looks cheap. Right. And I'll give a good example. You think of something like the original Hell House LLC. Their budget was around that area, and there was nothing gory about that movie. There was no special anything. It was a really well thought out found footage movie that had a great location, right? So to me, it always becomes about asking a filmmaker, do you have a handle on your material? Do you know what you're making? Do you understand what anything costs? And are you okay with the word no? because I've been a producer for a long time in the independent space. I have worked with a wide variety of independent filmmakers. And that is a conversation I've had to have more often than not is, no, you can't do this. You don't have the money for this. You're not going to pull this off right. This is not going to look good. That's hard for a lot of filmmakers. You know, egos get in the way, and versus what are you trying to accomplish here with this money? So, you know, I couldn't just blindly say, hey, this is what I'm going to do with this $50,000, because it comes down to so many things. What's the script? Do you have a great story on the page? Which, by the way, it always starts there. Because if you don't have it on the page, you're not going to fix it in post, which so many believe that's going to have. Like somehow magic happens in post when it comes to your weak story. So it always starts with, do you have a good script? Do you have a good story? And more importantly, do you have a handle on how to tell it? Do you have a handle on how to execute it? And if you don't, go back to the drawing board. I would probably hand that $50,000 back to that person and say, you don't have this ready yet. Right. You're going to waste your kid's college money. So why don't you put it back in your bank account and go back to the drawing board? And at least, you know what I mean? Because look, here's the truth. The biggest movies with the biggest budgets and the biggest stars, nothing's guaranteed. Nope. And this is why I say to filmmakers all the time, you know, who say, oh, is my movie going to make its money back? I don't know. Maybe. Well, I was told by such and such this. And I said, well, great. You know, if that distributor told you a bunch of fairy tale numbers, go back to them and ask them to advance you 25% of those fairy tale numbers they're giving you. I said, because they're full of crap and they're just trying to grab your content. Because if we knew, and I said this earlier, if we knew, there'd never be a failed movie again. And you look at the big budget movies with the hundreds of millions of dollars spent on marketing, and they still fail. They still fail. Yeah. So it has to start with a good story that you as the filmmaker know how to execute. You got to start there, right? Yeah. Because if you don't at least have that much, you're already starting off on a bad foot. That's a good answer. I know there's, we talked a little bit about the filmmakers. There's kind of a wave of ennui, negativity. Like they just feel like the indie market's crushing them. Yeah. What do you say to a filmmaker that says indie film is dead? We can't make money with indie movies anymore. Get out of the business. I mean, honestly, look, let's just cut to it. And listen, I contribute to you know, filmmaker forums and things like that. I see it all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, Amazon took their fee down. Blah, blah, blah. I can't do this. I can't do that. Listen, businesses change, industries change. This industry has changed so much since I started in it. If
Mm-hmm.
I was stuck on the old way of things, I would have got out years ago. Okay. You adapt, you adjust, you look ahead, you look at what's working, you look at what's not working, you look at the opportunity of like, hey, listen, I can not only make my own film myself, I could self-release it if I want to control it. Maybe I can put money aside and hire a publicist. Maybe I can put some marketing dollars aside. Maybe I can go hire a digital marketing company. In fact, if anything, to be perfectly honest, what I believe has happened is that the digital explosion and aggregation and the ability to self-distribute have created new avenues for filmmakers that never existed. So for a filmmaker to be saying independent film is dead, that's somebody who's just whining and crying and needs to just go call it a day and go work for mom and dad or whatever the hell it is you want to go do, and stop your bitching, because there isn't a single industry on the planet, okay, that doesn't suck in its own right, that doesn't have challenges, that isn't difficult, okay? Any industry is difficult, okay? So this whole idea that the independent film market is dead, wrong. In fact, there's more opportunities now that didn't exist 10 years ago for filmmakers. If they didn't exist, you couldn't produce a film and self-release it and control your destiny if you wanted to. There was no way to do that, okay? And now all of that has changed. So adapt, buck up, and just get over it. Get over it and get smart too. Like if you don't know how to do certain things, partner with a smart producer. And also, to the other thing today, too, filmmakers drive me nuts. There is so much information at their fingertips online, okay, on how to do so many things, right? There's ways to raise money. There's things to show you how, there's cheap camera packages. There are people hungry to work. There is cheap editing software. There are so many things that didn't exist for filmmakers, years ago that exist today. And all these filmmakers, all they want to do is complain. And to me, I have very little tolerance for that. Yes, do you want your movie to make money? Sure. Everybody does. But if you're in this business, okay, if you're in this business to do nothing but just make money, if that's the end goal, now there's nothing wrong with that, but you're setting yourself up for disappointment, okay? It is a very difficult industry to make money in, okay? And you're setting yourself up to fail if that's all you're doing it for. Then of course you're upset. Of course you're pissed off. Of course you're done, right? So you can either look at it that way, or you can look at it from the side of, wow, look at all of the opportunities that exist for me to be smart, to make an intelligent, interesting film that I care about, that I want to make, and maybe make some money at it, maybe control it myself, So it really becomes down to the individual. It comes down to the options. I see it as a positive. I see it as in a boom of the industry where there's a lot of opportunity for people to take advantage of if they want to.
Yeah, I 110% agree with you. I mean, I self-produce documentaries now, and just over the last year, I'm making these very small budget, between $5,000 and $10,000 things that I would have had no idea how to get placed even 5 years ago.
Right.
And now I can put these things out. I can triple or quadruple the money in a couple of months. And then maybe a year later, it pops back up again. I think it's an incredible time for movies. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And I'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure. All right. Good talking to you, Jason. Take care, buddy.
I agree with Joe 100%. I mean, look, indie filmmaking is tough. It's always been tough. But the opportunities that are available right now for indie filmmakers to make their films cheaper than ever, to actually get them distributed with little to no gatekeeping, is unprecedented. And granted, this access to lower cost production and easier distribution comes with its own problems. But it's a super exciting time for indie filmmakers if we allow it to be. So the next time you're looking at mounting a production and it just seems insurmountable and you just think that there's no hope for indie film, take a hard look around. It's much more hopeful than it's ever been. So yeah, keep making movies.